Hey, what's up, everyone? It is your boy Chuck, and very recently on Twitter and basically almost every popular platform for versus battles, we know that Death Battle is making a Deku versus Miles Morales video, and I saw a lot of downplay on the homie Miles, and I actually wanted to put my 2 cents on who actually would win this. And with me today is Dr. Splash. He's really well educated on the comics and My Hero Academia and a bunch of other stuff. So say what's up, man.
I'm excited to be on. I've been talking about this subject a little bit on my channel recently. It's gotten a lot of buzz. I didn't know it was going to be this controversial. I don't interact with the My Hero fan base that much. Pains me that they've been coming at me the way they have because I'm an All Might fan. Miles downplays kind of crazy, and I think we're going to touch on the most important parts of why he's a lot stronger than people think.
Yeah, so to get started, I think you could probably cover like what Miles has done in the recent years in 616 canon, and then I will go over Peter Parker's scaling because he does scale to Miles. They scale off each other, so it's actually really important for another argument that I'm going to be talking about later on. But
Yeah, so Miles, there's some foundations to his scaling that I think are very important for those that aren't as familiar with it so that you don't leave here confused or still stuck on some arguments made by people that think Miles loses, right? So first of all, Miles' power isn't exactly the same as Peter. While yes, he was bit by a spider who obviously gives him crazy powers like invisibility, the regular standard powers we see Peter Parker has, on top of his bioelectric shock that he produces. But on top of this, in recent Marvel, they have revealed the reason Miles has been able to perform such absolute bullshit throughout his time, including the likes of when he was just a baby Spider-Man, literally rookie. He knocked out Peter twice, nearly killed him on accident, using just infinitesimal part of his power, which would develop. And this is because there is a god, Anansi, Azazi, however, I always mispronounce it, but he's the African god of storytelling. And he is the direct pantheon opposite of God of Stories Loki, a multiversal weaver of destiny, fate, and stories themselves. And he essentially operates off stories that are told. In his belief, the best champion for him is Miles Morales. This explains why Miles literally tanked retcons. He was able to end Secret Wars, talk to Reed Richards about stories that no longer existed in timelines and narratives that were erased by the literal editors. Reed himself said this should not be possible for any character like that, but now we understand why he is able to do so. On top of this, his god also follows him around in the stories now, telling him when danger looms and the story and plot is literally developing. This power as well has allowed him to become significantly more dangerous to higher tiers. And the reason this gets crazy too is when Miles was younger, he had a lot of trouble properly manifesting this power. It would leave him headaches, dizzy. And T'Challa himself encountered this and said, look, I have a way for you to get a lot stronger, and I have a way for you to use your power and manifest it without hurting yourself. And he designed a full vibranium suit because vibranium boosts mystical properties significantly. That's why Dr. Doom tried to rob their asses back in the day, but that's another story. Now, yeah. We have Miles with this full vibranium suit no longer has the drawbacks of his power. In his battling heralds of Ares, now Ares is a jobber in Marvel. I will tell anybody that. If you've seen my channel, you know I hold that belief. However, if Ares farts, all of My Hero Academia dies. That's the honest truth. This is a guy that fought the Chaos King, regularly fights Thor and Hercules, beasts with them on Tuesday. These same characters can manipulate the world tree, destroy the world tree. This same world tree bears infinite multiverses, timelines, even cosmic gods beyond time, spaces, and dimensions. My Hero fans, you haven't even heard of shit like that. If you just stayed within your series, you've never heard of scaling like that. Like, your cosmology is insignificant to that. And Miles is empowered by one of the more important gods on these pantheons. In fact, when his god got into a beef with Ares back in the day, Ares and his beef is the reason Olympus and all of them formed the Godheads or the God Council, because they had to come to a peace treaty. Creation was in trouble. So we are severely underestimating in this downplay the power source that Miles draws from. This power comes from a literal god, and it explains why he can take down heralds of Ares, who Hercules himself, modern Hercules, who fights Thor and Hulk for fun, literally said, this guy, before he was amped that Miles is fighting, was strong enough to give me a problem. Miles also was clearing the labors of Hercules that scale to 616 Hercules. No problem with his Bioshock and punches. New Miles is no joke, and it's even stated narratively and power-wise. The old Miles, who scaled above 616 Peter, beat him twice. And it's stated in every guide that says he has all Peter's power, skill, and even more on top of that, and obviously this connection to a god. That same Miles Morales that scaled above Peter is insignificant in power to current Miles, which explains why he can mess with the likes of Grendel, who only Thor could stop back in the ancient times. It explains why he can take on Null, even damage his avatar. It explains that why he could take down Heralds of Ares. So yeah, he's an absolute monster, and a lot of people do not properly take into account his source of power and why he's so stupidly broken and why he continues to only get stronger in 616.
Yeah, and one of the things that I saw a lot of people like trying to misconstrue what I was saying on Twitter was, you know, like I did say Miles has Herald feats and higher, right? But I wasn't saying he could beat Null or he could decisively beat Grendel. Like that was not the whole point. The whole point was he can fight threats that would logically, narratively, and you know, cosmologically speaking, done everything in My Hero Academia. That's the whole point. And he can fight threats that can deal with characters that would on the whole verse. That's just a fact, right? Another really good feat that was pretty early on for Miles was when he fought Blackheart, right? You know, sure,
he beat the shit out of Blackheart.
yeah, literally, Blackheart literally beat the Avengers right before then. They had Wanda on their team. I think they even had Thor.
Yeah, downplay of that made no sense, and people actually say like, "Oh, that's because Miles can hurt demons." Okay, but that doesn't mean demons scale to street level. You still have to be strong enough to fight them. Like that's just another reason why it explains later how he gets that strong. It's because he's empowered by a literal god who gets stronger and has more enjoyment when Miles a success as a storyteller. Crazy downplay. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, also another thing too, I have two really good analogies for this is, you know, Elden Ring, right? You know how different weapons have different elements, right? They have lightning or they have scarlet rot or they cause bleed or whatever, right? And some enemies are weak to this. But if your weapon does like 2 or 3 damage, like sure, it's going to be weak to your, you know, elemental attack, but you're not doing enough damage to really kill it or hurt it, right? So, or like in Pokemon, right? You know how there's, you know, different water attacks with different values. You have like an Aqua Jet, right? That barely does any damage. You fire it at a ground type, it's not going to kill it in one shot, right? But if you have a Hydro Cannon or a Hydro Pump, then yeah, it's going to do a lot more, right? That's the whole point. It is not really just that Miles has something that these demons or these other dark entities are weak to. It's also because he has a lot of power behind it, right? So that downplay doesn't make any sense. Another downplay I thought was really crazy was people talking about the whole Grendel thing. They're like, oh, he got defeated by a furnace, even though Grendel, narratively speaking, is just absolutely insane because Null created him since the beginning of time. So for billions of years, right? This thing was ravaging the cosmos. Yeah, it was unchallenged. It was unchallenged for a long, long time, only until he fought Thor. And that was like in the couple thousand years ago or something like that. Yeah, if you want to talk about like why narratively that's insane because of all the civilizations that are in Marvel.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I don't quite understand. I told Chuck before the video, some of the downplay, I understand why we address it, but some of the downplay quite obviously comes from never having read the comics. Grendel was tearing through the infinite universe, where gods themselves were stated to fall beneath her and the other cosmic dragons. Gods, not humans, not aliens, gods. At the bare minimum, gods in Marvel are extra-dimensional beings, right? And if you don't know what extra-dimensional means, beyond the regular spatial dimensions, and Marvel will lowball the 616 universe to infinite 4D. We'll just lowball the hell out of it, even though I could do a lot of damage right now. But for the sake of My Hero fans,
they don't want that.
Yeah, for the sake of their sanity, we'll keep it infinite 4D because that obviously already on My Hero Academia. So Grendel was tearing through gods, tearing through pantheons. Civilizations are falling. Ghost Riders existed back then. On top of this, the magic users that you would encounter in the universe, as explained by classic Doctor Strange, back then were a lot more dangerous because the civilizations were not as civilized. They were not as connected. There weren't as many rules, so to speak, across the cosmos. So you could kind of be a hood rat. And so because of that, these same beings were a threat to classic Doctor Strange when he would pull up on them. These are the same beings that are also on Earth. There would be a Sorcerer Supreme on Earth during this time. There would be the likes of Ghost Riders on this Earth around this time.
There would be a Phoenix host too.
Yes, and with
a Starbrand.
There would have possibly than other mutants. Like it's a lot of that would have been there. The Shi'ar, the Kree, all these civilizations existed as well. They got torn through. They didn't do anything. So for that to all happen, I don't know at what point you could downplay, especially when at this point too, you have to acknowledge the speed. Like this is someone that came from outside of 616, entered 616 and tore across the cosmos until eventually Thor with his divine light was able to break that connection and damage the connection because of this specific divinity providing weakness to what Null was, similar to how Thor's divinity works similar to celestial light. Like it's just that powerful. Like, you can't, I don't get it. Like the people that hurt Grendel, like Thor, like Ghost Rider kinda, like if that's your downplay when comparing to Deku, like we've lost the plot. And when you talk about the furnace thing, I didn't know this downplay was used, but that furnace in particular was specifically
people are insane on this, bro.
Yeah, it was designed for specific threats, like symbiotes, like a Grendel. It still didn't finish for good, but on top of this same Grendel took hits from Hellfire, like Ghost Rider. Like these symbiotes were taking hits from Ghost Rider's Hellfire. Like it's so obviously it's not normal. This was specifically designed. Miles also, I didn't mention this, but I'll mention it so people can put out the downplay. This same Miles hurt and put down for a while Extremist Carnage. This same Carnage built a literal universe, like had his own realm, and he was compared in his darkness, Cletus was at that point, to Null. So yeah, stop the downplay. Miles is really that guy. He has the exaggerated swagger of a black teen, and it shows in every page.
I guess another thing I wanted to go over was, Peter scaling to him and, obviously scaling off each other. From all the stuff I read about Spider-Man over, several years, because I'm gonna make like a huge Spider-Man video. I've noticed like several dozen feats of him fighting heralds, and this is pretty consistent, right? Now, a lot of people were complaining on Twitter. They're like, oh, these are like outliers, right? But my whole point was, there's a difference between an outlier and a high end. A high end is just a high distribution, right? And there can be several high distributions on the graph or whatever you're measuring, right? An outlier would be something that's completely outside of that distribution, whether it's low or high, right? There's dozens of feats of, Peter Parker fighting these heralds, right? For example, he literally like trolled Hercules and Rogue into like clashing into each other, knocking each other out. He literally finessed them. He even fights against Moondragon. He outright like dodges her like faster than thought, like mind hacks, and faster than thought is pretty insane if you want to go over that later.
Marvel 60s, like their thought could cross the infinite universe in a moment. Like it's ridiculous in Marvel what thought scales to. The laws of physics don't work the same, obviously, as real world.
Spider-Man can even straight up get multipliers like, mid-battle. And this is pretty consistent too. Even the guys themselves state that when Spider-Man is pushed, or the Spider-Man in general, because we've seen the other ones do this as well, they can get crazy power jumps, right? For example, when Spider-Man and She-Hulk are trying to like lift like this trapdoor, right? The She-Hulk like leaves later on, and Peter's like, oh, like how am I gonna lift this when I was struggling with She-Hulk? But then he like powers up through that and manages to get out of the trapdoor, right? He even fights Howard Cosmic Carnage and actually does pretty well against him. Spider-Man without the symbiote suit, I mean, I know he does look like he has a symbiote suit in that battle, but it's actually just a black suit, right? So he wasn't amped in that fight. Against Fire-Lord, he beats the shit out of him, right? He even fights Eric Masterson Thor, and he even struggles against him a bit. Another one, Spider-Man even fights Silver Dagger, who was actually giving Doctor Strange some trouble. He even like takes several punches from him too. And even very recently, Spider-Man was able to break or at least dislocate Wolverine's jaw. And even back in the older days, he was potentially capable of like breaking his neck, right? Now you could decide if, if it was just like an angle, like, breakage, or if he would actually literally shatter the bone, who knows? But either way, he's strong enough to do this, right? My whole point was, I'm not saying that Peter is going to beat Hulk or he's going to beat Moondragon or he's going to beat Colossus or whatever, right? My whole point is he can endure hits from them. He can keep up with them. He can hurt them. He can stagger them. He can make them bleed, right? And Miles scales above that Spider-Man that was fighting those guys in the early days. And these are just a couple of feats, right? I have way more than these. And there's a lot of street tiers, like quote-unquote street tiers, like Luke Cage, right? Daredevil, Captain America. All of these guys have had crazy feats. Now, are they always consistent as Spider-Man's? Probably not. But the point is, even the quote-unquote street tiers in Marvel are fighting higher level threats than anything in My Hero Academia. And Spider-Man is literally narratively supposed to be above all of those guys anyways on a good day, because there's a lot of guidebooks, even back in the old days, where they said only Hulk, Thor, and Thing were above Spider-Man in power. And they even said this is still Spider-Man before he's even an adult. And then eventually, they even made Spider-Man like a upper mid-tier. And then they made Thor and Hulk, a higher tier, obviously. But the point is, just logically speaking, Spider-Man is not a low tier. He is an upper mid-tier. He's easily in those hero levels. That's the whole point. And then, obviously, Miles scales above that. So I just don't see why there's a lot of downplay for Spider-Man and just Miles in general.
Yeah, and if you check my channel history, I don't have the most beautiful relationship with Peter Parker. I was actually known as being like a Spider-Man hater, and I'm about to cut a mean promo. If you guys are curious about the evidence, right? If you don't think there really is consistency here or a lot of higher end stuff, I have servers with every single appearance and feat for Spider-Man, Daredevil, Captain America, these type characters. And on my channel, I have something called the Definitive Scaling Series where I show all of their feats, including listing the sources. So if you guys are interested in more than that, I guess you can venture over my side. But the point is, what he's referencing, all those things that are impressive, that are easily provable, which, by the way, I hate to break this to you, Peter Parker has more Herald tier feats or multiversal to outer feats than Deku has multi-continental. That's where the confusion comes in for the Marvel and comic book people in general, and I think I'll take over here on our point about hypocrisy with scaling. What me and Chuck have talked about when it comes to this matchup that we see very prominent in the online community is the hypocrisy with the scaling. And what I mean by that is us comic book fans will happily let the scaling stand for the higher end Deku. The feat of him, or the feat of weather being changed for a week, that scales to multi-continental, we let that stand. FTL to MFTL scaling, we let that stand. Because we understand characters reach peaks and they have higher end scaling when they reach that. Deku, you can't argue he walks around the series consistently multi-continental and up. He's not at that level. So imagine if we tried to hold Deku to the consistency standard of what he was doing in chapters 1 through 20, like the anime fans try to do to Miles Morales. Miles has more higher end feats than he has regular ones, especially because of his recent storylines as a herald of a god. And he was so significant in stories like with Null, God of Nothing. So when someone killing Celestials, what are we talking about? It gets so extreme, and for us to show the higher ends while accepting the higher ends for Deku and not being hypocrites and being like, oh, Deku doesn't consistently scale there because look in chapter 5, he wasn't even faster than a bullet. And then you would argue, okay, but he's just starting out. Well, why are you trying to hold Miles to his low ends that happened over a decade ago? And why are you trying to hold him to low ends in general? We don't do that. That's like holding Goku to laser level because he's been taken out by one. It's lazy, it's dishonest at best, and it's ignorant too, because it just means you're not reading his comics. And I'm not even a huge Miles fan, but I'm not going to sit here and act like the scaling's not there. It absolutely is. And to have this weird logic that Marvel humans are just regular humans is stupid. They descend from literal gods. Captain America's super soldier serum could stabilize celestial power. That's ridiculous. Beyonder himself, he said, Eternity, all of them, they see humans as a threat because they can reach that power and their potential. It's absurd. So the downplay is just based out of ignorance. And again, there's a lot of hypocrisy involved when it comes to the scaling and what we call consistent. You have to be fair to both sides.
Yeah, speaking about the whole, ignorance thing, there were a lot of people that were trying to debunk it, even though they themselves said on the post they don't even read it. They just got a debunk from, quote-unquote, debunk from someone else when they don't even know the argument to begin with. And they would even try to say, oh, this is not 616, even though it is 616, right? All the scans I showed were 616 in my whole Twitter thing. Another thing I wanted to talk about was when the Deku fans tried to talk about, the whole destructive capacity versus attack potency thing, because I don't think they really understand that, because they think, oh, Deku makes a big explosion, that means he's, is gonna shit on, everything that Miles does, right? Because Miles hasn't blown up like a continent or whatever, right? He doesn't have to. He has attack potency well beyond that. This is greatly shown in Marvel and DC, Dragon Ball, whatever. There's always some type of area of effect, right? The area that's affected does not necessarily equate to the power that is behind it, right? Silver Surfer, when he was enraged, he blasted Thanos. He literally says, I warned you. And it, scorches his chair. Is that chair level, even though Silver Surfer literally has said he can destroy planets and solar systems and galaxies, even back in the classic days? Or like when Galactus blasted Thanos and it left like a little crater? Are you telling me Thanos is like crater level? Or, you know, for example, in DC, when Darkseid and Anti-Monitor are fighting, they're literally multiversal, hyperversal, outerversal threats, and their whole battle in the New 52 in the Darkseid War, it like doesn't even destroy a city. When these guys are so strong because of the cosmology, they don't need to be blowing up everything, all right? They don't need to, how do I put it? They don't impose upon themselves. They're not like, look how strong I am, I'm blowing up everything. They don't have to do that, because if you have read these comics for a while, you'll know that they can easily do this even back in the early days, and they've gotten way stronger since then. So when people try to downplay with the whole like, oh, you know, Miles hit like Blackheart with like a mailbox, the mailbox should have gone destroyed, you know, or whatever, right? And he's like mailbox level. It doesn't matter, bro, because him hitting Blackheart with that mailbox has more force behind it than anything in My Hero Academia. Even if you heavily downplay Blackheart, bro, he is still well above any of that, bro. There was another point you wanted to bring up earlier with like the Thor and Godzilla thing for like the attack potency thing. Yeah.
By the way, if you haven't checked that comic out, go check it out. It's pretty fire. Thor vs. Godzilla, they just recently had a canon crossover with early immortal Thor battling Beast Incarnate and then eventually Necrosword, God Butcher Godzilla. Ultimate fan service, right? The point of me bringing this up is, while they're fighting, these are clearly two outerversal forces going back and forth. Earth is surviving this fight. They then take it into the atmosphere because he's like, hey, eventually Earth might get hurt by this. My point with that is, they had already thrown outerversal strikes, like, and Earth is enduring it. Obviously, if they abided by area of effect equals destructive capacity every time, there would be no Earth in Marvel. There wouldn't be a universe either. Sorry. They're too strong. Yo, I gotta say this because I just realized this. Imagine if comic book fans said that Goku wasn't planetary because we watched him fight the resurrected Frieza on the planet, and Frieza was only a threat to blow up the planet when he specifically said he would. So that would be like us saying none of those strikes they hit each other with were above planetary. That's stupid.
Broly's
like,
also
that's
not
crazy.
Too.
Yeah, that's absurd. That's like
Yeah,
like comic
it's so
book
stupid.
readers, we would never do that to the other side. So it's pretty crazy.
Another thing that Deku fans were trying to bring up was like the potential like soul hacks that Deku has, and I mean, I think it's pretty clear why Miles would not be affected by that.
This is real simple to debunk. For one, Marvel willpower is directly tied to how well you do with soul hacks. Miles has already shown he has at least Black Panther tier toughness and willpower. He literally fought on the astral plane against Varney, who can take on Sorcerer Supremes and is a demon that possessed T'Challa, and he did just fine and was able to go toe-to-toe with him on this astral realm without help from his god because it was a trial. So he literally has soul feats that scale not just to the soul, but obviously it's extra dimensional in nature, and that's nothing really My Hero has. So yeah, that's a GG right there too. That's not going to work. I will, I guess, just real quick conclude with my thoughts that I've seen some people on my videos complain about chain scaling. I told Chuck we can use chain scaling and just beat the shit out of Deku with that. But I think it's important to also emphasize you don't need chain scaling for Miles. You can just take his direct feats. You can just take who he's directly fighting.
And then when we use the direct feeds, they just say it's an outlier. So, you know, how the f are we supposed to win, right? Against these, you know,
like I said,
it makes sense. They just switch their goalpost every time.
I'll put it. Let me tell you how comfortable I am in the pocket. I got $100 right now, right? That says no one can show up on a live stream with me and show more multi-continental feats for Deku than I can show Uni Plus for Miles. There's also, I'm pretty sure there's more appearances of Deku than Miles, if we're being technical. So yeah, it's just weird. The arguments against Miles, they don't really make sense. And it's important to note that all the impressive shit we said about Peter and the fact that we can make an argument Peter beats Deku, the weakest versions of Miles scale to and above Peter. And the weakest versions of Miles are insignificant to current Miles.
Whether we go through chain scaling, the cosmology, the technology of these civilizations that fought Grendel, you know, the narrative and statements of him, you know, basically being Peter's successor, right? He's basically supposed to be like Peter's Nightwing or like Peter's Gohan. He's supposed to be like the next step up. He's supposed to be better,
to be honest. Like, that's where it gets...
Yeah.
It's obvious too, like even with the power cosmic, like Peter's wielded it and then Miles had his turn with it and Peter said, dude, I wasn't even half of what you were. Like Miles has always been put over. Like he's always been next up. And now it's revealed and confirmed he's connected to a literal god that's powering him. That's why he's so much more broken than Peter.
Thing I wanted to mention too is like a lot of these, they're either non-comic readers or they don't read like the current stuff, or they're just straight up ignorant. Is they're like, oh, it's not consistent, right? Because Spider-Man's a street tier or whatever, right? How long have they not read these comics for? 10, 15, 20 years? Like, if you've read any of these comics, whether it's like Thor or Hulk or Spider-Man or Storm, yada yada, they've all gotten way stronger in every single way. Like 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, Storm and Thor, Hulk, all these guys had to band up together to fight like the Chaos King or Infinity Gauntlet Thanos or whatever, right? They all had to gang up to fight this huge threat. But now by themselves, they can fight threats stronger than that. So I think a big part of why people downplay Miles is they don't think they can progress past that. It's like saying that Goku is always the same power level or Naruto is always the same power level, right? Just because you guys can't see him as being that strong doesn't mean that he can't be. That's just an argument from incredulity. I saw a lot of logical fallacies in all these like idiotic comments on Twitter. It's just crazy. Like they'll be like, oh, a lot of people agree with me, or I can't believe that he's that powerful. It's inconsistent, right? So they'll always change the goalpost. So I'm gonna be real. Like if Death Battle makes Deku win, like whatever, I honestly expect them to. They're probably gonna say that Deku has probably better attack potency or something with his, with his ultimate attack and whatever. That's probably what they're gonna say. I really don't care if Deku wins or not. The whole point is, if you go through all these different scales, as I said, not only through chain scaling, through the narrative, the statements, the cosmology, logically, right, technologically speaking, Miles just fights against higher level threats than My Hero Academia. Like think of it this way, right? Planetary threats, that's just another day for people in Marvel, right? So like the high tier threats in My Hero Academia are low tier threats in Marvel. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, what's Deku doing when I drop him in to fight Null? What's the class do when the school bus arrives at Marvel New York and Null is invading with his cosmic dragons? Let me know how they get down with that. When they run up on Extremis Carnage, when they run up on the Herald of Ares, who just pushed back Hercules, who's held up all of the multiverse before in place of Atlas. For emphasis on how this would go, it's funny. I'm going to do I do something called battle swaps on my channel where I have two characters switch the battles they have in their series. I'm going to do that for Deku and Miles. I want y'all to see what Deku would have to deal with if he spent a day in Miles' shoes. And you'll be like, oh, okay, never mind. We're going to leave Miles alone.
Put him in Yancey Street, bro. See what happens.
Yeah, he's going to die. They have extra... Yancey Street is a hood, a regular hood, which I named my fan base after in Marvel. They have extra dimensional bells on Yancey Street. Because that's the they deal with on Tuesday, okay? It's tough out here in Marvel.
Yeah, and also another thing that I wanted to mention, just to put the final nail in the coffin, is when people try to like downplay like the furnace, for example, for Grendel. It's like you guys do realize that technology in Marvel is like highly advanced. These guys deal with hyperdimensional like theories and like higher spatial dimensions. Like, are you guys serious that you really think that this furnace is gonna be a normal furnace when it's supposed to be something that kills gods? Like, come on, bro.
So when the Deviants wanted to get rid of the Celestials, they're like, how do we do this? Or how do we get rid of the Eternals, rather? And the Celestials, because we haven't beat them. They beat our asses. They said, one of their people said, let's get the humans to beef with them. And they're like, what? Why would we do that? And they're like, because humans are dumb enough to think they can beat the Celestials. And they have laying around that they can do that with. This is World War II, like 60s, 70s era. Like, it just happened. They compared fighting Celestials to World War II. They got some shit. They were pulling up on Deviants. They were ready to fight Celestials. It's great. These are New York cops. They've arrested Thanos. The raft is capable of holding Thanos' tears. What's Deku doing if he lands on Krakoa? It's a lot of and it's just you can't apply regular street scaling to Marvel at all.
As you guys can see, Deku is getting washed more than likely. If Death Battle makes him win, whatever, bro, they're gonna be wrong anyways. So yeah. Anything else you wanted to add?
Nah. Thank you for having me. I've covered this matchup. Again, I'll probably do the battle swap, and if they say Deku wins, well, regardless, to be honest, if I don't like the research, regardless of who wins, I'll probably debunk it. We'll see. But if y'all like what we did here, I'll definitely spend the block on that.
Yeah, bro, thank you so much for being on here. Couldn't have done it without you. You really know a lot more than I do. So, I'm glad that we were able to come together with that. But yeah, I hope you guys have a great one. Be sure to check out Dr. Splash's channel. He does pretty much does everything. So thanks again, and I hope you guys have a good one. Peace. More money.